Good morning, everybody. We will be beginning at 11 a.m. Good morning again. We'll be beginning in a couple of minutes. I'll just give maybe a few minutes for some of our attendees to be able to join. And we'll be starting around 11:02. Good morning, everybody. We are just going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Nestor Diaz, and I am an account manager at Innova Solutions, Puerto Rico. Today, we're going to be talking about working from home and specifically how we can use tools that are already in your current Office 365 or Microsoft 365 licensing to do more in your day of work, to be able to take processes and workflows that may have been built for a pen and paper physical space world, and they've been sort of forced into digitalization, to be able to take those workflows and truly transform them into digital processes and how that can help us get more done. So before we do that, we'll take a quick look at our agenda for today. We're going to be doing some quick introductions first, and that's just going to be a quick look at Innova, who we are. Most of you probably know us, but we will be mentioning a little bit about what we do. It's only about 50 slides. No, I'm kidding. It's just like 2 or 3 slides. and then we'll get right into the actual meat and potatoes of our presentation today. We're going to be looking at forms in Power Automate. This is going to be a demo for an overtime approval form. We're going to be looking at Powerapps in Power Automate. That's going to be a bit of a more complicated digitalization of a time off request form. We're going to be looking at how to centralize our automation and our resources and our workflows within Teams. And then finally, we'll look at a nifty little Teams add-in called Shifts and how we can sort of bend it to help us control access to physical spaces and be able to meet COVID and social distancing regulations. So as you can see from our brief agenda, most of our topics today are just going to be demos because that's what we want to do. We want to introduce you to these 4 tools very briefly, and then just sort of show you potential ways to use them to spark your imagination and to get you thinking about, all right, these are the processes that I have at my company. How can I use these tools to improve, to transform, to automate, to streamline those processes? And before we get started with our introductions, feel free to take a look at the little chat box. It should be on your screen. This says Q&A. That little chat box, we'll be using it throughout the webinar. I would like, if possible, and if you feel compelled to do so, feel free to share where you're joining us from. If you're out from Puerto Rico, if you're from Curacao, if you're from wherever you may be from. And if you want to share your company, feel free to share that as well. Do note that that Q&A comes directly to me. It is not innately public. I can publish the Q&A for everyone to see, but I will only be doing that for questions. So feel free to just let me know where you're joining me from. It's just a fun little thing I like to do. On that note, regarding questions, you will also be able to pop all your questions through that Q&A box. That's going to be the one mechanism we have to channel your questions. So feel free to write them down at any point in the webinar, but be aware that there's going to be a specific Q&A session at the end. So while you're able to write down your questions at any point during the webinar, I will only be taking a look at them at the end. I have a couple minutes left for that. All right, I think that's pretty much it in terms of mechanisms and rules. So let's just do the introductions. Most of you probably know Innova Solutions. We are clearly the best LSP in the Caribbean and Latin America. Our mission has always been to empower organizations of all sizes to create business advantages by adopting digital transformation. And this webinar today is a clear example of that. We'll see as we move forward through the presentation that a lot of companies still have processes, still have approval workflows that are not designed for a digital world, but they do have the tools to be able to take those processes into the digital world, into the new digital realm. And there are clear advantages to doing that. That's what we'll be discussing. Some quick facts about us. Our headquarters are in Curacao, and out of there we run our accounting, administration, marketing, and several centralized departments. But we also have regional presence with sales and support specialists in Ecuador, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Puerto Rico. We have customers on about 3 continents. We've been the winner of the Microsoft Partner of the Year for the past 6 years, and we use what we sell. So everything you're going to be seeing today in our presentation is in use within somewhere or some area of Innova Solutions. What's more, every single product in our catalog is in use somewhere at Innova. So if someday we talk to you about Azure Backup or Windows Virtual Desktop or Exclaimer for signature management, all of these pieces are pieces that we use internally. And what this means for you is that we are able to understand how the pieces work and interact. And so that gives us a lot more flexibility to adjust to your use cases. It gives us a lot more flexibility to be able to fit these solutions to your company needs. At Innova, we divide our offerings in 4 main areas. We, of course, do licensing. We sell licensing for Microsoft, Adobe, and Exclaimer solutions, but most of our business is in Microsoft. We also offer training for every single solution that we sell, and this can be both end user training, just to get your users up to speed on how to use an application, as well as IT user training, training your IT staff and departments to understand how these tools work, how they can administer them, and even getting them certified if that's something that you would like. It's certainly something that we recommend. We also want to be more than a retailer, and so in doing that, we've created a rather extensive solutions or IT operations department. And what this department does is it's able to take some of the workload off of your internal IT resources, or even become your IT resources if you're a small company without a dedicated IT department. And we're able to not just sell you products, but go through implementations, migrations, best practices, customizations, integrations, whatever you may need to be able to ensure that these products become more than just tools, they become actual solutions to issues for your company. And we also have our customer care program. While this is aimed mostly at our larger customers, specifically our enterprise agreement customers, bits of it can be applied to our smaller customers as well. What the customer care program is a list of 7 to 9 activities that we have identified in the life cycle of a Microsoft volume licensing agreement. And these are activities such as planning licensing renewals, ensuring that your infrastructure is up to date and up to speed to be able to deploy the licensing you've purchased, ensuring that the deployment is carried out in a timely and efficient manner, ensuring that users are trained, ensuring that you're licensing or that you are licensing products in the optimal manner for your business. All of this is included within that customer care program, and for our largest customers, it's included at no cost. For some of our smaller customers, depending on the activities and what you may need, we can discuss offering those as part of our solutions department. And that's it in terms of introductions. So let's get down to the good stuff. And to start, let's think about this question that's on screen currently. Let's ask ourselves, are my company's processes built for work from home? Are my company's processes still built to work in a pen and paper world? How does, for instance, a purchase approval work in my company? Maybe a supplier sends me a quote in a digital PDF. I then have to print that out and send it to my department head. And he takes the printed paper and he signs it and he scans it again and it's a PDF again. And then he sends that to the purchases department, and the purchases department receives that, and the person that receives that has to send it to their department head, who also prints it out and also signs it and also scans it again, and then it's a PDF once more, and then a PO is generated and that PO is sent back to the supplier. Why? Why are we doing that? There's a lot of steps in that process, a lot of printing, a lot of scanning, a lot of physical signing that maybe could be done digitally. Why are those PDFs just floating around the inbox? Why are they not centralized somewhere? Are we truly transforming our processes to the digital space? Or are we still trying to fit pen and paper, physical space processes, and just sort of removing them from one box and putting them in another? Because if that's what we're doing, and sadly it's what a lot of companies are doing, it's not the most efficient way, and we're wasting money that we've paid for good tools that are already in our licensing. So we have to ask ourselves, can these processes be streamlined? And in 99% of the cases, the answer is yes. And so there's a lot of ways to do that. A lot of ways to do that. There's an entire industry built around ways to do this. But we are going to look at 4 apps that are already in your Microsoft 365 or Office 365 licensing, and that can help you improve these remote workflows. And what we're going to do, rather than look at each of these apps bit by bit and what they can do, which is long-winded and boring, we're going to look at 4 little demos of these apps already working together and already streamlining processes. And then hopefully those demos will be able to spark your imagination and let you think about, all right, so if it could do this in the demo, maybe it can do that within my company. So let's get started. Let's get started by looking at a simple demo of a relatively simple process that, once again, can be digitalized. And it's the process of overtime approvals. Almost every company has an overtime approval process. Sometimes it involves a pen and paper form that is filled out by the employee, who then hands it over to their department head, who finally hands it over to HR. And there's 1 or 2 or maybe 3 levels of approvals. And finally, it's archived somewhere so that future generations know whether that was approved or rejected until eventually it's destroyed. So rather than having that process live in that physical space, in that PDF form or that pen and paper form, we can use Microsoft Forms, Power Automate and SharePoint to completely digitalize this process. Microsoft Forms will serve as the engine for my little form that my employee will fill out. Power Automate will carry out my approval process, and we're going to look at a very simple approval process here, but this can be complicated as much as is necessary for your company. And SharePoint will serve as that digital archive for all the approvals or rejections and a history of what has been set up in this little overtime approval request form. Since the backend is SharePoint, that means we can apply retention policies, that means we can apply user security, that means we can apply all the good stuff that we already have in our SharePoint document sites to our digital archive. And this form does have some prerequisites. We need access to Microsoft Forms, and that's included in pretty much every Office 365 package, and of course, also the Microsoft 365 ones. We need to create a form that will be used for employees to fill out and then share that with my company's users. We need access to Power Automate, and within Power Automate, there's a free plan, and then there's more complicated, what Microsoft calls premium connectors for services like Dynamics 365, services like Azure. Those do have an added cost, but for this first demo, they're not necessary. So you can do this with the free Power Automates plan. And then you're going to be using a SharePoint list as a backend. The users of my form don't necessarily require access to that SharePoint list, and we'll see why as we go into the demo. However, whoever designs the flow or the Power Automate approval process does require access to that SharePoint list. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's get right into it. We're going to jump into our browser session here, where I am user. User is an employee at CSP Demo, which is our little company. And user will open up his Outlook mailbox. He will zoom in so you guys can see everything. And my admin, my department head, and in this case, the person who handles the approvals as well, his name is CSP Demo, and he has sent me the link to the form for the overtime approval. So I can go ahead and reach that form. It out. There are some required fields. And Microsoft Forms has flexibility for you to build these forms in whatever way you may need. There's short text fields, long text fields. The long text fields can have formatting or no formatting. There's fields for things like math equations and special characters. There's multiple choice optional, where the user can choose not to choose anything. Single choice out of a list, as we see here in the little department option. There are date fields, there is branching, so maybe if I choose that I'm in the IT department, the rest of the questions that I get are different from if I choose that I'm in the sales department. I can have that done. I can share forms only internally with my users. That's what's shared here. If a user that is not part of the CSP Demo company tries to fill out this form, they will get an error. And there's really endless things that I can do in these little forms. So it's pretty much built to meet any need that I may have. I'm just going to finish filling this out, and let's say we're requesting overtime for yesterday. And I'm requesting 3 overtime hours because I stayed late practicing for the webinar. And I want to get an email receipt of these responses sent to myself. So I'll mark that and click submit. And as soon as this response is submitted, an automated workflow process, an automated approval process starts to go into effect. For one hand, I get the copy of those responses. On the other hand, a couple of things are happening in the back end, and we'll switch over to my administrator's view in order to see those things happen. So we're here in the administrator view. We will open a couple of tools here. I'll start by opening Power Automate. I'll go here to the section called My Flows, into the overtime approvals flow. Now notice here that I'm getting a bit of information about this flow. I can see if it's on or off, when it was created, when it was modified, the type, the connections that I need access to in order for this to run. And notice that all of these connections, come right in here, press edit, are not set up as the user that filled out the form. They're set up as the admin user. That means that the connection that I'm going to be using to fill out my SharePoint list to add, edit, and remove items from that list is my admin connection, or the connection of someone who has access to the SharePoint list. It does not have to be the same user that fills out that form. That means that if for security purposes, I want to keep my digital archive separate and I want all the HR to have access to it, and I don't want all the users who fill out my form to have access to that SharePoint list, that can be done, no problem. It's already built into this. And so let's take a look at what this is actually doing. In order to do that, I'll click Edit up here, and I'll see my little flowchart. So this is triggered when a new response to my overtime approval request form is filled out. And the first thing it does is it gathers up the response details, creates a SharePoint overtime request item, and it sets the status value to requested. It then starts an approval process. That approval sends an email to a person or group of people. And I have options for this approval. I can set up a simple approval where I send it to one or more people, and the first person to respond, that's our answer. If the first person said yes, it's yes. If the first person said no, it's a no. However, I can have more complex approvals. I can have everyone must approve, so everyone has to say yes in order for it to be yes. If only one person says no, it's automatically a no. Or I can have a custom workflow that I decide and set up, where either I wait for all responses or just one response, but maybe I weigh some responses more than others. I have options to set up this approval process. I also have options in the message that's shown to the person or group of people that receive the approval. Right now, I'm sending them an email with some quick overtime request details, but I'm also sending them a link to the item so they can go directly to the SharePoint list and see the request in full. Once that approval is sent out and completed, I decide or I take a look at whether it was approved or not. If it was approved, I set the item to approved, and I notify the user. And if it was rejected, I set the item to rejected, and again, notify the initial requester. So if I go to my Outlook inbox, I can see that there's already that approval here waiting for me. I can click into it, and I'll see that, hey, here are those, that's overtime request awaiting my review. There's some quick details here. It was requested by test user. It's overtime that happened yesterday. It was 3 hours, and it was because he stayed late practicing for the webinar. If I needed to see more details, I can click in here. And it will take me straight to this list, and I can see the details in full. And these are all default views, or at least very simple views that we've created for this demo. But again, we can get as complex or as simple as your company requires. Once I decide what to do, I can approve or reject. I'm going to approve it. And I'm going to say good work and good luck on the presentation. I can set here comments, and these comments, particularly when a request is rejected, are very useful because they can be shared back with the initial requester. And if, say, some documentation is missing, or they can do something to sort of resubmit the item for approval, then we can include those details in the comments. I'll click submit to submit that approval, and I can see that it's already been approved. In fact, if I move away and come back to this item, it'll retain that approved view. So no approval is going to be approved or rejected more than one time by accident, because the entire little window changes, and I can see that it's already been dealt with. If someone else had worked with this approval, I would get a message saying that someone else already handled it. Now, back on the user side of things, if I go back to my user inbox, I'll see that, hey, here's a little email letting me know that, hey, my overtime request of 3 hours was approved by CSP Demo, which is my boss. And he sent me these approval comments. So here we have a simple process that typically lives in pen and paper, and we've completely digitalized it. It completely lives in the digital realm now. There's no need to have a physical archive. There's no need to have PDFs floating around my inbox, loading my HR's inbox size, none of that. A simple process working with 3 tools: Power Automate, Microsoft Forms, SharePoint. That's it. We're done. And this is a very simple overtime approval request and request process, but we can complicate this as much as is necessary to fit my needs. So again, if you have questions, doubts about what's possible, feel free to pop those in that Q&A box, and we will take a look at them in our Q&A session. All right, let's move on to our next demo, because what we just saw was a very simple form of automation, but we have said a couple of times that this can get a bit more complicated. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at a time off request solution. The user is going to be able to request time off for one or more licenses, maybe vacations, maybe sick time. Those are the two that we have configured, but you may have more. You may have an additional time of PTO. You may have jury duty. You may have a funeral license. You may have a military leave license, maternity leave. Whatever you may need, we can add to this. But for now, we're going to look at a simple solution that just has vacation and sick leave requests. This one's going to be a bit more complicated, and we're going to need to request more details from the user. And we want the user to be able to see a history of their requests in the same little solution. We want them to be able to see if they've been approved, rejected, or if they're still pending approval. So instead of using Microsoft Forms, we're going to use Powerapps now. And we're also going to be using Power Automate for approval workflows and a couple of extra steps. And we're going to be using SharePoint as a backend. So let's talk a little bit about these three tools. We've already discussed Power Automate and SharePoint, but what is Powerapps? Powerapps is Microsoft's low-code solution. It allows us to build applications that can be accessed through the web, through mobile, and of course through the Windows 10 app for Powerapps. And these applications are designed in a very simple drag and drop interface with very low amount of coding. In fact, the short or the small amount of coding that we are going to be doing resembles Excel formulas a lot. So it's a more lower barrier of entry for users that don't know how to program to be able to build their own apps. This solution does have as well a couple of requirements. So we need to have access to Powerapps, and Powerapps is available in Microsoft 365 Business Standard. That's the one that used to be called Office 365 Business Premium. So that licensing or higher. So Microsoft 365 Business Standard, Microsoft 365 Business Premium, Office 365 E1, E3, E5, Microsoft 365 E3 and E5. All of these solutions include Powerapps. This form, the one that we're going to be looking at, could technically live in Forms, but it would be harder to have our users be able to keep track of their previous requests, their historical requests, and be able to see if they've been approved or not, unless we give them access to the actual SharePoint site and the SharePoint list where these are going to be located. For an easier way to see all of this in a single pane of glass, well, you're going to need Powerapps. We're also going to need Power Automate, and in this case, we may need premium connectors, particularly if our users are spread out geographically and across time zones. This little solution that we're going to be looking at is not only going to be able to request time off, it's also going to be able to look at users' calendars, set that time off in my user's calendar, and cancel any events that may have been planned for that day. So because of that, it needs to be able to handle time zone translation. And we do that via a connection to Azure, and that's a premium connector. So if we have a user that is a little bit, or if you have an environment that's a little bit more distributed, a little bit more complex, we may need access to premium connectors here, and that may mean that we need access to Office 365 E5 or Microsoft 365 E5. We also need a SharePoint list as a backend. In my current build, what we're currently going to see deployed, users of the application need to have access to SharePoint because we use the same user login that is being used to access the Power App to place these requests in SharePoint. Now, this doesn't have to be this way. Again, if I want to sort of abstract that list access, I can make sure that my Power Apps only interacts with Microsoft Power Automate, and then Power Automate, which can be created with a privileged account, that one would have access to the SharePoint list. So I have options in terms of security and restricting access. Well, that's enough of a prelude. Let's actually take a look at the solution. And for this one, we're going to go straight into our admin view. So we're going to come back here to our CSP demo user. We're going to close this inbox for now, close this. We're going to go back to My Flows in Power Automate. We're going to go here to Powerapps. Now in Powerapps, I can go to apps to see the applications that have been shared with me. And I could, in theory, get a link directly to this app as well, so I don't have to do all of these clicks. I didn't have that set up, so I had to go through all the clicks. But once we're here in our app list, it's just a matter of clicking the app we want to access. And it's going to load up. So as it loads up, it's going to recognize my user. It's going to see that I am CSP demo, and it's going to show me only the time off that CSP demo has requested. That means that if I come in as test user, our other view, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And as I load this, remember to feel free to keep popping your questions in that Q&A box. I will be answering them at the end. Here we go. And notice that the amount and the requests that I'm actually seeing are different. It's because the view is filtered based on the user that's accessing the app. So I can build these sort of security and access restriction features right into my Power App. I'm going to go back to my admin view here. And I can see that depending on the status, I can either just view the details for a request, or I can actually go in and edit them. However, if a request has been approved, I can't edit it any longer. Approved or denied, for that matter. So let's handle a couple of requests here. I'm going to press new request. I'm going to type in my name here. I am CSP demo. There we go. That's me. I'm requesting this today, and I'm requesting the 21st of July off. I'm going to request the full day off, so I'm starting at 8 a.m. I'm going to end that the same 21st at 5 p.m. and this is military time, so it's 17. And I can choose the license type I want to use. It's just a vacation day. Time off reason, I would like to binge a Netflix series. Honesty is always the best policy, right? That's all I'm going to be doing. Can't go anywhere because of COVID. And if there were any attachment that I needed to upload to justify my Netflix series binging, perhaps a screenshot of the series that I'm going to binge, I can go ahead and attach that here. I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to save the request, and hopefully there are no errors. And there we go. There were not. And if I look at my list here, there's now a little scroll bar, and I can scroll to the side, and I can see that, hey, here's my request. Now, in my little demo office, in my little demo environment, that approval is going to come to me as well. So I'm just going to leave that up there. And while that approval workflow sort of runs and the email is sent out and it gets to my inbox, let's look at what this is doing. Because we mentioned that these approvals could get more complex. We mentioned that these workflows can be complicated a little bit more. And I want you to see that I was not lying and that these can get quite complex. Well, there came in that little email. Now we'll just go over what this is doing pretty quickly. I'll just open some of these, not all of them. And that is a chunkier workflow. Even then, this workflow is not as chunky as it should be because for time constraints, I did not build any error handling into this. So this, for production, if it were to be used to production, needs to get quite a bit chunkier. So you can see that we can get as elaborate as we want to in these workflows. And just let's take a look at what this gigantic bad boy is doing. We're going to need to scroll quite a bit, but we'll get through it. So my Powerapps is going to be submitting that time off request directly to SharePoint. And what I'm going to be watching for here, rather than a response for a form, is a new item being created in my SharePoint list. As soon as that new item is created, I start an approval. And again, this is a very simple approval, single person, first to respond, done. But we can have multiple levels of approval. We can have multiple people approving. We can have an approval review process. This can get as complex as you guys want it to get. We'll initialize some variables that we're going to be using later below, and we'll take a look at the approval. Because if it's rejected, well, there's not much to do. I'm done. I tell a user that their request was rejected, and I update the item in SharePoint, which will update their view in their time off request app. But if it's approved, there's a couple of extra steps I have to take. What I want to do is I want to be able to block off the user's time in their calendar. And if they had any meetings scheduled for that day, I want to be able to cancel those meetings as well. So let's take a look at how it does that. And right before I do that, I'm going to ask you for just 30 seconds while I take a sip of water. All right, good to go. So what I'm doing here is if this is a vacation time request and I'm approving it, for the purposes of this demo, I'm not canceling events on that day. I'm just creating a new event in that user's calendar where let's say, oh, this is the no path. Here we go. I'm just creating a new event in that user's calendar where I mark them as out of office, and I mark the start and end time for that event based on the start and end times that the user filled out in their time off request. Now, this is where we can get complicated, because if my approval user and my requesting user are in different time zones, then I'll need to do some time zone conversion before I can just plop this bad boy in here. So there would be extra steps in here then that complicate this a little bit. And we can see those extra steps on the path where the user requests sick time off rather than vacation time. So if a sick time request is approved, I'm going to set it as approved. I'm going to notify the user that it's been approved. But then I'm going to get that user's calendar. And I'm going to look at the calendar and its time zone. And I'm going to convert the time zones for the calendar and the time zones for the time off request, make sure that they are the same. I'm going to set up automatic replies for that user automatically. So if anybody writes him for the day that they requested to be out sick, they will automatically have an autoresponder both for internal users and for external users. I'm then going to look at their calendar and see if they had any events scheduled for that day. And then if there are events scheduled for that day, and I am the organizer of those events, I'll simply delete them. And that will send all the other guests for the event, all the other attendees, the people that I've invited, it will send them a cancellation notice. However, if I am not the organizer, deleting the event has no effect. So I have to actually respond to the invite with a decline notice, and that will contain a little message saying that I'm out sick for the day. So automatically, this flow is not just handling the time off request, it's also handling the approval, and it's also taking a look at the user's calendar and blocking that time off, canceling other events that may have been there if necessary. So let's take a look at it in action. I'm going to request a sick day now. Let's choose a day where I may have activity here. The 23rd, why not? Time off request app. And my name is CSP Demo. I'm requesting the 23rd off from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm requesting a sick day because I have a doctor's appointment. And if I needed to attach a document showing that appointment, I could go ahead and attach it here. I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to submit this as it is. And that workflow is going to start running. Now we can come back up here, and we already have the time off request for the vacation time. And oh, I have to do a little bit of work on this presentation here, but there's the reason you would like to binge a Netflix series. Let's approve it. We'll say, have fun watching, I don't know, Parks and Rec. And it's working on that approval. Go ahead and leave it to submit that. New approval is coming in. This one would be for the sick time. And oh no, I got a little error. This sometimes happens. Let's try it one more time. There it is. It went through. Didn't even have to click it again. I'm going to get a notice saying that, hey, my request for vacation time was approved, and told me to have fun watching Parks and Rec, so I'll do that. But here's that sick time request. Sick time request. Let's approve that one as well. We'll say feel better. Submit it. And there it goes. There it went. Here's that approval for that time off. Now you saw, if you were observant, that the little drafts button here suddenly went 1010. Why did that happen? Well, it happened because in my calendar, first off, for time off, the vacation time that I requested, I now have an event for that. And look at that. It says I'm going to be out of office. I'm going to be out of office all day. Fabulous. But also notice that on the 23rd, I had some events and they're gone. Now, most of those events were actually with our user, test user. So if you go over to test user's inbox and we take a look, hey, there was a performance review event and it was automatically declined. They got an email from CSP Demo saying, hey, I'm out sick for the day. I didn't send that. The approvals workflow did. And again, we can grow this and add to it or remove from it as much as is necessary. So feel free to let that spark your imagination. That means, for instance, that depending on your, say, ERP solution, if you're using, I don't know, Sage 100, you can connect Power Automate to Sage 100 and automatically deduct that sick day, that vacation day from your user's balances. I believe it's also possible in Sage 300. So we could grow this and add complexity to it as is needed. Even for some ERPs or for some applications where there is not a built-in connection, sometimes we can leverage Azure, we can leverage other pieces of middleware to be able to achieve that extra interactivity. So this can grow and grow and scale as much as you need it. Now, we do have one problem that the third demo is going to look at, which is that we have a Microsoft form, we have a Power App, we have SharePoint lists, and they're all in the Microsoft 365 cloud, but they're in different places. I need to have different links. I need to be able to wrangle those links and find them when I need them. So how about we just turn Teams into our sort of hub for collaboration? Well, we can do that. We can embed all of these solutions in Teams. It has the same licensing requirements as the previous demos, the same permissions requirements, and keep aware that if you're embedding this into a team, all the team members require, I should say, access to those resources in order to be able to access them. So if we go here to our user view and have our user access Teams, I'll have to use the browser version because the desktop version I'm using to run this event right now. So I can't log into the demo environment. But I have this Puerto Rico CSP demo team, and there's a general channel, I should say, and an HR request channel. And notice that this HR request channel has my overtime approvals form. And it's the exact same form. It also has my time off request form, and it's my time off request app, and it's the exact same app. And it continues to detect that, hey, this is currently test user, so only show the request for test user. So they work exactly as they would in their sort of natural environments, but without having users have to hunt down forms, apps, or resources. Also keep in mind that all of these solutions are accessible for mobile. So there are either mobile apps or mobile-friendly websites for your users to be able to access these resources. Let's take a look now at our final demo, and this is going to be controlling physical spaces through shifts. And shifts is a nifty little add-in for Teams. I'm sort of running out of time, so I'm going to speed up a bit here. I'm going to go into my Teams web app as an admin. And you can simply add shifts by going to the More Added Apps option, and it's usually right here. You can also search for it, but I already have it added. So once you add it, you want to right-click and pin it to ensure it stays there. And Shifts is designed, as its name would imply, to be a simple little shift management solution. So for employees that have hourly workers, they can choose and assign their shifts here, and employees can go ahead and pick shifts, and they can decide how they're going to handle the workday. But even for those of us that don't work that way, we can use this as a solution to control access to our offices, because often we may have users who are not ready to work from home. Their internet connections aren't great, maybe power to their region isn't very stable, and maybe these users would still benefit from having access to the office. But maybe our office is tiny, and so I can't just fit everybody in there willy-nilly. If I want to keep social distancing protocols, if I want to avoid any OSHA troubles, I need to be able to ensure that these spaces are controlled. So I can define groups here, which can correspond to my physical spaces. I can then create open shifts, and I can create slots within these shifts that design how many people can share this space. So for our Inova Puerto Rico office, it's a very small office. And maybe I have an open office space where I can only fit 3 people. And one of those 3 people is going to be whoever's responsible for registering my employees as they come in and ensuring that only the registered people have access to the office. So if there's 3 and one of them is always occupied, I have 2 slots available. Our Inova office also has a pretty large conference room. So maybe there I can fit 3 extra people. And maybe I can divide my workday in 2 slots, AM and PM. And so I have conference room AM, open office space AM, conference room PM, open office space PM. I can then add users to this schedule and just have them pick out these shifts as necessary. And then my users can register for access to the office and be able to have access to that physical space in a safe, controlled manner. We can have our demo user log into the shifts, see the shifts that are available, and say, you know what, today in the afternoon, I want to work in the conference room. And that's automatically requested. Once I request it, it goes to my approval manager, to my administrator. That's the person who set up the shifts. They can see the shift here, and they can deny it, or approve or deny it, and sort of send comments if necessary. Our user will then see that their shift has been approved, and it's now added to their own personal schedule. And while we don't need to actually track hours for most of us, if that were a need that you would have, you can do that here. You can also set up activities for each one of these shifts if you want to have more control over what the user should be doing during the day. You can go ahead and connect this through Power Automate, again, to maybe your ERP or some sort of other HR app. And you can even have this request and approval process work automatically. So your administrators don't have to approve the actual requests. They just are continuously approved until the space is filled out and no open slots are available. And when that's done, the shift is removed from the available shift list. So again, this is a little app that we can use to take a new challenge that COVID has presented and be able to handle it in a digital, streamlined manner. That's pretty much it. That's what we had for you guys today in terms of demos. I hope that sparked your imagination. But I guess the question now is, how can Inova help you? Well, we can help you set all of this up. We have different services, or rather, all of our locations have a services arm, but we brand them differently. So what I'm showing you here applies to the Inova Puerto Rico office. The same services may be available at other, or definitely are available at other Inova locations, but they may be called differently. Their scope may be a bit different. But we have 2 main offerings. One is called our Inova automation process, and that's our premier Power Automate and Power App solution. Basically analyze your process and decide whether it needs to be redesigned or if it can be just transferred as is to the digital platform. We'll go ahead and deploy it through Microsoft 365 or Office 365 tools. But if you have a more advanced workflow, maybe it spans your line of business apps, maybe it spans workloads running on Azure, and you need something a bit more complex, we can look at what we call invisible technology integration. And here we can actually analyze your project. We do that case by case and work with development partners to create connectors or integrations, even if they don't necessarily exist, and be able to provide your business with the flexibility and the digitalization that you need. Thing I had for you today, I am right at my time limit, so I will take questions for a couple of moments. Any question that I cannot answer now, I'll try to answer via email. So if your question isn't answered, feel free to pop in your email. Let's take a look here. Amy asks, can the approver have a kind of detailed list of approvals to produce reporting? Yes. So because the back end of these lists is SharePoint, everything that we can do in SharePoint, we can do with these solutions. And so if you want to export the list of approvals with their status, with who requested it, who approved it, etc., we can have that. I'll do you one better. If we need to have a sort of audit trail, who has touched this list item when, who approved it, who requested it, if it was requested but then denied, who did the second level of sort of rejection, all of that we can see because it's something that we have built in through SharePoint capabilities. So thank you very much for your question, Amy. I don't know if you may have extra questions, doubts. We took a look at a lot. It was a lot of information, I am aware. But we sort of wanted to be able to show you the possibilities. All right, just wait a couple more seconds. All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, feel free, if you do, to keep popping them in there. I'll do one more look before I close the session. We want to give you the chance to try this yourself. So we want to give you the chance to try it. As we say in Puerto Rico, con todos los power, which means with all the capabilities. So feel free to visit portal.inovacorporation.com. In there's going to be a little search box where you can pop in Office 365 E5 trial. I will also pop in this link in my questions box. Let's see if I can select it here. I am having a small issue selecting it. Let me see if I can share the link with you guys. Let's click through it here. It's opening. I'll share this link in the chat box. There we go. This is the little trial you should get. So feel free to add that trial to your cart. Do the checkout process. That'll give you 25 seats of Office 365 E5, and it will grant you access to that for 1 month. You'll have everything in there. You'll have Power Automate, you'll have Powerapps, you'll have forums, you'll have access to premium connectors. Everything that you could possibly want is going to be in that little trial. Play around with the apps. If you have any issues, any questions, contact your Innova account manager, and they'll be glad to help you work through them. Then finally, we'd like to ask you all to stay connected with us. You can write us at sales@inovacorporation.com. Our website is www.inovacorporation.com. We're on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn as Inova Solutions. So feel free to reach out to us and keep in touch. We're going to be doing more of these webinars as we usually do, probably one near the end of the month or for next month. We don't have the details on that one yet, but stay tuned and we will share them out shortly. If there's nothing else, I would like to thank you all for your time today. I would like to wish you all a fabulous day and take care. Thank you.